It's almost that time of year when the kids go back to school, so we have tips for parents with adolescents preparing for college. And as always, with those tips, clinical psychologist Dr. Tim Hope.
Morning.
I love seeing you. You always give people great advice. And this is a very tricky transition generally for parents and kids.
Yeah, it is.
So we have lots of good ideas, and the first thing, seems obvious, talk about it.
Right, so this is a constant theme that I keep coming back to, which is open the lines of communications with your son or daughter. As they're going off to school, you want to try and have as good a foundation as possible because there are going to be all kinds of new challenges to a new degree as they're going off to school, regardless of whether it's right nearby or if they're going across the country.
And to make that conversation easier, a great thing that you can do is educate yourself as to what's going on.
Right. So you want to know what is going on for your child. What is the schedule looking like? What kinds of services are available to them? What kinds of activities are available to your child? What is the living environment, the food environment? So getting as much of information as possible is really going to help arm you with the information you're going to need to help make good informed decisions and support your child.
Well, I remember for me, when I was going to school, I was just so excited, for the social aspect of it, and that transition, getting ready to go was so difficult. I didn't realize half the clubs that were available to me, all the resources that were available. So if there's a parent there saying, well, Seth, did you do this? Maybe did you think about joining this? It's really helpful.
It really is, because it gives that message to your child that you are embarking on adulthood. You're going to need to do your work, but you're also going to need to make social connections and have some fun, because that really helps us to manage the stress, and that any new transition that you're making is going to be stressful. So college is just another one of those.
It's terrifying at first, but yeah, you're right, the well-roundedness. You need to have a little fun and a little paranoia, because that makes you all good if you have both of them. The next thing, you need to provide reassurance to your children.
Right, so you know your child best. Right, so you know what they need, so you can help them to decide about what kinds of support services are available. Maybe your child has a learning disability. Maybe your child has a physical ailment that's going to need to be managed by the on-campus health services. So getting your child hooked up with what those services are, get them educated, that really can help provide them that soft landing getting into school.
Now, earlier you talked about the importance of conversation. We all know how important that is, but sometimes it can just be dinner table conversation. How was your day? Good, good. So you say to engage in open communication, and I think that makes a big difference. It's the next step from the dinner table conversation to what's real.
Right, so how are things? Fine. Well, how are you really feeling about this? You look like you might be feeling a little bit nervous. I was nervous when I went off to school. So share about your own experiences of making that transition, and then you can also help to open that door with your child, because they know you're human. You actually were a child at one point too. You actually may have gone to school and had some challenges around that, and how you worked it.
And when it comes to 18-year-old kids going off to college, there's a whole bevy of topics that, as a parent and as a kid, are very uncomfortable to talk about with your parent or your child. So if you can tackle those head on, you're going to be in a lot of a better situation.
It really is a good opportunity for you to begin to relate to your child as the adult that they are becoming, because sex, drugs, and rock and roll are really going to be tempting for them as they go off to school.
Well, and that's the thing, it happens.
It does. And you want to make sure that you help to support them, give them the knowledge, the ways of thinking and problem solving, and so that they can explore who they are in ways that are safe while anticipating consequences of their actions.
Well, and that brings us to our last point. It's important that we do all of these things, but it's important that we don't stop. We need to maintain proactiveness.
So that means set up a regular time to talk. That means set up times. What is your plan around the holidays? Are you going to be coming home? Are you going to visit your child at parent weekend? So be proactive in planning throughout the year, so that way you can reassure your child you're going to maintain those connections.
And between Skype and the smartphones, there are so many ways to keep in touch, and you never be afraid to call the school too. There are ways. So as long as we can do that and we're open about it, we're in good shape. Now, later in the show, you're going to talk to kids, because just as parents are having all of these fears, the kids are probably having just as many. They might be a little bit different. So later in the show, we're going to discuss those. We're back with Dr. Tim Hope. He's a clinical psychologist. We're talking about fears that parents have when the kids are going off to school. Yeah. But kids have the fears too.
Sure, they're anxious about making that transition because it's a big leap for them.
Very much so. So we have some tips for them. The first one, strike a healthy balance.
So, like we were talking about earlier, you're going to have a whole host of activities and resources and things to do available to you. You're there for school, but it's also learning the ropes of life as you embark on adulthood. So do that balance of learning, work, have some fun, socialize.
I remember half the time the most important life lessons I learned were not in the classroom. For better or for worse, they were in the dorms and they were in the dining hall, all those places. Next one, utilize coping skills. What do you mean by that?
So we all have learned ways to cope with our stress. And there are many more coping skills available. Talk to your parents about what they have used to cope. Talk with your friends who have already gone off to school, what they use to cope. That could be simple things like get good exercise, get good sleep, make sure you're eating a well-rounded diet. And then there are more psychological ones like doing deep breathing and doing relaxation, do yoga, thinking positively. All of those things are coping skills that we might not think of so readily because we do them automatically all the time.
And another coping skill is to keep in touch with your folks. It's one of those things, you've grown up with them for 18 years, you go away to this foreign place where they aren't. I'm sure it feels really good to give them a call every once in a while and talk to them about how you're feeling.
It does. So striking that balance between going off on your own and really being independent while still maintaining touching base with your home base, because they're available to you for support, they're available for you for advice, they're available just to cheer you on and say, hey, that's really great, thanks for sharing it with me.
In the case that the kids aren't homesick, which happens a lot, you go to school and you're having so much fun, you've got buddies, you've got a room to yourself. You don't often want to come back home for these holidays. It's imperative that you do, though, and it's imperative that you talk and you make plans about these things.
So before you go off to school, it's a really great time to talk with your parents about what are your expectations for holidays. What does the school calendar look like? What holidays or times might you want to stay at school? What times do you want to come back home? And really managing that is really a useful thing for you to think about in terms of planning, but it's also going to be useful in terms of touching base with home.
Now, when you go to school, kids, if you haven't yet, you're gonna realize this. Hundreds and thousands of kids, you need to create positive, good relationships because it's easy to go and meander down some bad paths.
So you're going to be exposed to a whole host of new people that you've never met before. And it's really wonderful because it helps to broaden your horizons. That diversity is really a wonderful thing. And you want to be careful and thoughtful about, who do you make connections with? What do you share with other people? And building up those relationships, because those relationships are really going to sustain you through college, and some of them may turn into lifelong relationships. So be thoughtful about it.
Now, Dr. Tim, there's a couple more points, and these two might be, at least to me, the most important. Give back. College provides students tremendous opportunities to really impact the world around them.
There are all kinds of volunteering opportunities or work opportunities or opportunities that you just might create on your own. And doing that helps you to feel like this great experience that you're getting in terms of your education, you are also contributing back to your world, whether it's in, say, the local food pantry, either on campus or in the community that you're living in, or volunteering in a school. There are lots and lots of different ways that you can give back, and that really will help to enrich your experience.
And lastly, it doesn't matter if you're the most well-adjusted kid in the world, if you have a million friends, or if you are just terrified. You always feel these moments of self-doubt, but colleges have great mental health programs, so there's always someone to talk to.
That's right. There are good on-campus health services, disability services, counseling services, religious and supportive services. There are all kinds of services available, so really availing yourself of them. Know what they are before you go in, and then if you need them, they're available for you.
Always a pleasure talking to you. It's a tough time for kids and parents, so I'm glad that we shared these tips. And if you want even more, and if you want these tips elaborated on mymassappeal.com is the website. But also coming up,